Greetings, gang, and welcome back. We take the geographic plane and we head west here in chapter 12. If you had to list Latin American cultural influences on American culture, what can you come up with? If you had to take a minute and think about that, what would be some things that would come to mind? For me, I was thinking about pop culture, and these would probably overlap with many of your ideas. Pop culture, breaking the piñata at a child's birthday party, celebrating Cinco de Mayo, tacos, I'm told sell more than hot dogs. I don't know if I believe that, but that's what I've been told. Baseball, boxing, music, and a growing influence in Congress among Latino and Hispanic legislators. And again, I say all that to say that we are in the Western Hemisphere this week, and we'll be here for the next couple of weeks, because you know where we're going to be going. There's only one other place to go after this before we have our wrap-up chapter in chapter 13. Turn to page 466, and as you do that, I will get us set up here. Go, and let's look at the major heads-up terms here for this particular chapter. We're going to talk about the Maya Indians out of Guatemala and El Salvador, the indigenous peoples, the Aztec Indians they were ethnic groups out of Central America, think Mexico, and the Incas, modern day Peru, on the west coast of South America, South American continent. A Treaty of Tordesillas, a demarcation line set up in 1494, developed, or the concept of it, 1494, 46 degrees west longitude, would go to the Spanish, west of that line, and east to Portugal. More on that, develop that obviously when we get there. Let me see where else I want to go here. The encomienda system. The encomienda system is a Spanish feudal system. The haciendas were production estates. Peninsulares, Spanish-born people in the New World that were born in Spain. Viceroyalties, administrative divisions. The Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, James Monroe, his administration, told Europeans that, look, you guys will stay out of our backyard in the Western Hemisphere. We will not entangle ourselves in European affairs. And ejidos, co-ops owned by the Mexican government. Major objectives here. We want to explain Latin America's cultural history. We want to understand, I want you to understand the origins and after effects of U.S. involvement in the region. I'd like for you to appreciate the economic development of Mexico and Brazil. And I want you to discuss, when we get to discussion questions, U.S. drug and immigration policy regarding Latin America. Let's dive in and look at regional cultural history. Regional cultural history, the pre-European peoples, the lasting influence, as I say here, of the Mayas, the Aztec, and the Inca peoples. The Incas formed in the south of modern Peru. They were very warlike. Their influence covered 2,800 miles. You turn to page 480, figure 1112, you can see a good inset map of their geographic influence. The official language is Quichua, which is still spoken today. talking about the Portuguese and the Spanish. Just take a look at the Spanish colonization first. The Treaty of Tordesillas. Treaty of Tordesillas established the demarcation line at 46 degrees west longitude between Spain and Portugal. The eastern quarter of South America would go to the interests of Portugal. And you can look at page 481, figure 1113. And you're asking, probably somebody are asking, well, who thought that up and why? Well, rumor has it, excuse me, rumor has it that the idea came from none other than Rome, the Pope. He just thought it would be a terrible thing for two Spanish Catholic countries to be fighting each other over land. So hence the demarcation line. Again, rumor has it. Spanish control, right? How do the Spanish operate? You know, once they're on in the New World and they have subjugated the indigenous subjects. Spanish rule consisted of a geographic system on mineral exploitation and transportation to a few ports. Large estates engaged in raising livestock and a rigid class structure. The encomienda system, again, these are heads up terms. You can get the spelling from the top of the lecture model. The encomienda system was a feudal Spanish system. Large land grants went to nobles, soldiers, and church officials who would therefore exploit the resource wealth and establish settlements. Spanish colonial agriculture developed large production estates called haciendas. And from there, they would cultivate crops and raise livestock for domestic markets. And you can guess where this is going, right? The subjugated neighbors, right? They were, the natives, not neighbors, the natives were the laborers who lived on the haciendas in exchange for their work. The Peninsulares, these were Spaniards born back in Spain who were living or working in the New World. They would take the highest offices. And some of you may be thinking, sounds an awful lot like the European feudal system, you know, the warlords and the vassals and knights and the peasants. And if you're thinking that, you're right. It's very similar. Portuguese colonization, right? We're going east of that demarcation line now. And the Portuguese, they set up a governor. They set up a governor in Brazil in 1549. If you look at your inset map there on figure page 481, figure 1114, you could see the city of Salvador on that. Well, the city of Salvador becomes the first capital. Well, the Spaniards are no longer there, right? The Spanish government is no longer there. And so when did all this independence come about? Spain and Portugal were weakened by resisting Napoleon. Late 1700s, early 1800s, new countries emerged in Latin America known as Spanish viceroyalties. Unfortunately, colonial boundaries were poorly surveyed, causing future problems. And we saw something similar to this too in Africa, south of the Sahara. So independence from Spain. Mexico gained their independence from Spain in 1821. And if you take a look at your map on page 488, figure 1118, at that time, Mexico stretched from, you know, the present day southwest border of the United States right down through the Panamanian border. Central America, as we know it, that region separated from Spain a little while later, 17 years later in 1838. Brazilian independence. Brazilian independence from Portugal. Brazil encouraged immigration and received many from Germany, Italy, and Japan in the early 1900s. Continuing external influences. Import substitution. The region's goal was to become less dependent on selling unprocessed or unrefined raw materials in exchange for high-priced manufactured goods from industrialized countries. The Great Depression and World War II enlightened Latin America to be more internally self-sufficient as a result of that. Turn to page 468. I want to briefly go over the climate and the physical geography. And you could turn to figure 11.2. And I just want to briefly talk about three things here. First is the tropical climates. And figure 11.2 is a climate map there for you to look at. Tropical climates dominate Middle America, as you can see by the map, the Caribbean Basin and northern South America dominates those areas. Arid climates dominate northern Mexico, southern Peru, northern Chile, and Patagonia in southern Argentina. You have humid mid-latitude climates are found in eastern South America and southern Chile. Turn now to page 471, figure 11.5. The collision of tectonic plates forms the region's dominant physical features. Insular and mainland Middle America has numerous volcanoes and earthquakes, and you can see the plate construction there via the map on page 471. And then thirdly and lastly here, in this little section here, I want you to turn to page 466 and we'll take a look at the results of that seismic activity. And you'll see the Andes Mountains there. They're the world's second highest mountain range, and they run the length of Western South America. Now, interior South America, east of the Andes, is dominated by broad plateaus and a wide river valleys. And then heading east toward the Atlantic, the Amazon River Basin, you can see that there. That's home to the world's largest expansive tropical rainforest. Soil erosion is a problem for many of the region's countries, and there's some air and water pollution that's especially bad in some of your urban areas. I'm going to talk now about economic strength within the region. Has a wide range of that, from countries like Haiti that are among the world's poorest to economic giants like Brazil. Turn to page 486 as we start to get into global and local changes here. And you can see a chart that I love so dearly. It's kind of a standards of living chart, if you will. Take a look at that. Global and local changes. The Monroe Doctrine in 1823, the U.S. assumed the role of geopolitical leader of the Western Hemisphere. And by the early 1900s, there was a growing presence in Latin America by the U.S. And that has not always been welcome by Latinos in Central and South America, by the way. Well, let's dig into this a little bit further. The United States and Latin America, by the late 1900s. By the late 1900s, there was a growing presence in Latin America by the U.S. Latin America looked to the U.S. for trade, political support, popular culture as well. Miami becomes a strong cultural link. Well, what are the global cities there that connect it with the wider world? Mexico City and Sao Paulo, Brazil. Forgot to put that on the heads up terms there, but Sao Paulo, SAO space PAULO. They're the dominant forces responsible for placing Latin America into the global system. Population pressure, natural increase and migration patterns. Southern South America has the slowest growth. And if you take a look at your map there, thinking there Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, and they're growing at 1% annually population increase rates. And if you do that, if you're growing at 1%, which isn't necessarily bad, your population will double over about 70 years. 2%, you're growing at about 30, your population's gonna double at 35 years, right? So that's definitely not good. The United States, I think, just as a side note, we're at like 1.2% as well. But here's the other thing too. One of the reasons why that end, the cone down there, those cone nations in the South are growing slower is they have just had, well, it's two things really. Fewer immigrants from Europe, not like Brazil, and they've had a lot of wars with each other, right? Turn to page 499, and I'm going to start looking now at, as we look at the, start to wrap this up here, the last part of this lecture, honing in on various subregions. With a population of approximately 106 million, Mexico has the second largest population in the region and one of the largest economies in all Latin America. Look at figure 1124 on page 499. Keep that open there. Let's take a look at some of the political changes. I mean, Mexico, our southern neighbor, we know all about it because of immigration and drug cartels and right. But I don't know, largely unfamiliar, right? Their history. We're going to look at a little bit of that right now. This isn't a history class. Geography is great that way, right? Because geography covers history and cultures and economics. Political changes in Mexico. In 1821, independence was gained from Spain. They had stability up through 1871, largely because of the repression of the Diaz dictatorship. So that stability has, the repression of it has unintended consequences, right? And what it does is it serves to plant seeds for the Mexican Revolution in 1911. By 1917, 1918, after the new government is set up, ejidos emerge, one of your heads up terms. These are basically state-owned co-ops, and it serves to give your landless peasants some control over the land, right? Not a bad idea. Well, how about regional diversity in Mexico? Central Mexico is the seat of the population, political, cultural, and economic activity. And as you can see by the map there, it all revolves around Mexico City. Your East Coast plains, flip the page over to page 502, a couple of pages over, and your East Coast plains around the Gulf of Mexico and Yucatan Peninsula are areas of tourist attraction and a region of oil and natural gas production. I've been told just a week before last, a couple I know that came back from vacationing there, they had learned that, and you could see the gorgeous water right around the Yucatan Peninsula, but they were saying that it's probably one of the safest areas in the world to be at, you know, in regard to crime, because the Mexican government's making, you know, a killing on tourist money there. So they've got to keep it safe, right? And we know that a lot of the Mexican terrain in the country is really run by by drug cartels, right? So you have a lot of violent crimes, and so. But at any rate, very safe, right? Which would make sense. Economic development and the human landscape. The Maquia across the or along the northern border of Mexico with the U.S. The Maquiladora program of foreign-owned companies, companies where they import parts for assembly without customs duties, cheap local labor, and fewer environmental regulations. Well, less extreme environmental regulations are attractive to foreigners. More on the Maquiladora program a little later. You guys are going to have several short videos to see regarding those, which are going to tie into a discussion question. Now, before we get into the last subregions that I want to hone in on, I do want to touch on two of them that you know, definitely warrant a brief, a cursory look, right? Give them a little love, as I like to say. Turn to page 503. I'm not going to highlight this region, but I want to take a look at it. 503, Central America. Central America consists of 7 countries located on an isthmus extending from Mexico to Colombia. And with the exception, if you found that now, with the exception of Costa Rica and Panama, the countries of this subregion are among the poorest in Latin America, long plagued by political instability. Most economies focus on agricultural production. Of strategic importance is the Panama Canal, and you can turn to page 1128. And that connects the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic via the Caribbean Sea. Built in 1914, the Caribbean Basin is made up of 4 large, the canal is now too small for many of today's large container ships. Now, on figure 1128, you're going to see a picture of one of the container ships going through the canal. And recently, the Panamanian populace, they have voted on widening that because you have a lot of container ships from wealthy countries that are being built bigger now. And I think your authors mentioned Home Depot, container ships for them, and they're just too big. And you don't want them getting stuck, right? That happened last spring over in the Suez Canal. The second of the regions I'm not going to highlight that I want to talk about briefly here is on page 507. And that's the Caribbean Basin. And you'll see there that's made up of 4 large islands. You have the Greater Antilles Islands and the many smaller islands, they call the Lesser Antilles. And that was settled by Europeans to develop sugar plantations. The subregion has therefore, as a result of that, a strong African cultural influence. Tourism is important, is an important economic activity, as few places in the Caribbean basins are well endowed with natural resources, kind of similar to the Pacific Islands that we've looked at recently. Puerto Rico is unique in the region, as it is a commonwealth, actually, of the United States, and a political status that it's not independent nor fully integrated within the United States political system. However, Democrats in Congress, the Biden administration, have been hinting at trying to lure that with representatives, representatives that could contribute to, you know, voting in the Senate and House of Representatives as well. I want to say this too before I leave that section. Central America probably will tie in to a discussion question, and Mexico. We're going to be talking about immigration, and those areas are very poor. And we want to consider this as we did, you know, we look at the discussion questions later on in the week. It's been alleged that, you know, caravans have been bringing the poor out of El Salvador, Nicaragua, parts of Mexico up to the United States border, right? We want to look at that. And I think one of your in the news questions, one of your in the news options deals with that too. Let's kind of wrap it up here with the home stretch. I want to take a look at the Northern Andes subregion and look at page 512. 512. And as you go there, I'll just talk about the, well, you take a look at the inset map there. The Northern Andes subregion is comprised of Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. And the Andes Mountains dominate that region, and they isolate large parts of the country from global connections. The economies are based on mineral extraction, including oil and agricultural activities. Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia are among the world's leading producers of illegal drugs, and coca is the primary, but not the only export. Let's take a look at this here. Economic development in the Northern Andes. Export-led underdevelopment developed on smuggling coca and cocaine arose from the need to find a high-value product with continuing demand in the world markets and a continuing demand in the wealthier countries that can afford it, right? The North Andean countries that engaged in deeper involvement in the world economic system were often vulnerable as a result. Patterns of economic development and economic diversification. The Galapagos Islands, and you can turn here to page 515, figure 1134, another beautiful, gorgeous landscape. The Galapagos Islands in Ecuador, as I say here, that gets global attention. You have unique animal and plant species that attract scientists and tourists all over the globe. But here's the thing with that area, though. It's a temptation. It's a temptation for the government to exploit that situation by luring tourists, and thereby risk harming the pristine heritage that so attracts scientists. And lastly, the region of Brazil. Northeastern coastline and plateaus. Where I want you to turn to here. Page 481. Turn to page 481. The northeastern coastline and plateaus were first settled in Brazil. Sugarcane was blossoming on the plantations. Economic development in Brazil. Several concerns that regard the Amazon region include the destruction of rainforests, welfare of the Indians, and failure of settlers to grow crops on land. See, one of the things that's happening there is a lot of money is being made, you know, making those baseball bats and pianos and lumber for homes, right? So there, I mean, on that hand, it's good economically. On the other hand, folks are worrying about the destruction and the rainforest and, you know, welfare of the Indian settlers. Indebtedness and new policies. Indebtedness and new policies. Hyperinflation, rising prices and wages, spiraled out of control, devaluing the currency. And this was Brazil in the early 90s. There were defaults on loan payments, caused wider foreign debt, and caused foreign investments as a result to collapse in Brazil. Who's going to want to invest, in a country that's hyperinflated, right? Now, since 2015, since the latest edition here, inflation was at 9%. That's high. That's very high. That's how bad it was. It was certainly in double digits in the 90s. It was 9 in 2015. It's now stabilizing. It's at about 3%, 3.2%, which isn't bad. What happened was the government focused on fiscal reforms, and that primarily came down to cutting government spending, and less focus on price and wage freezes. That's what countries generally do when there's hyperinflation, instead of going after the government spending, right? So when you're cutting government spending, you're hopefully cutting government bureaucracies as well. Okay, so again, governments, they really don't create wealth, right? They survive off of taxpayer dollars. Not here to say it's good or bad, but someone's got to pay for it, right? So when you're not creating wealth, it has a tendency to be a drain on the economy. So that's what the Brazilians did. Okay, let's take a look at what's up ahead. And there's some different wrinkles this week that we need to pay attention to. Here we go. Trying to get my okay, this week we have coming up, we have items. I have an item sheet for you for the final on the course page. It'll be under chapter 11, what we're looking at now. An item sheet for the final. It basically tells you, well, let me see if I have that here, what you're going to be looking for there. Basically, it's 30 items we pulled from 30 to 40 items pulled from the quizzes, exactly as they were worded on the quizzes. You're going to have about 10 ID fill in the blank items you're going to need to know, and then your essay options. And don't mess this up, okay? Some folks don't either watch the lecture and then therefore they don't know about the item sheet. But the essay options, you're going to have 6 of them, 6 options. I'm going to give you the choice to do 5 of them. The last one is going to be mandatory. Okay, the last one will be mandatory. Your readings this week. Your readings, one of them is the controversial new development of U.S. troops in Colombia. Basically, we're fighting the drug war in Colombia with the military. I want you to read that. That's not in the textbook, by the way. That'll be on the course page. And some videos. You have the Mexican Maquiladora program, the political economic basis of the Maquiladoras, and then you'll have to look at the U.S. drug war. Again, these are all very short, right? Got a comprehension activity for you as well. In the news, Thursday night, Friday, your initial posts, right? Sunday, response post, quiz on Monday, and we began North America on Monday, and then Tuesday, your papers are due. Okay. And there you have that. Okay. Any questions, comments? You guys don't hesitate to get a hold of me. I'm looking at my emails all the time, except for Sundays, probably I dial it back. And again, if you want to talk about things, let me know ahead of time and we can, you know, do a debriefing segment on Thursday nights. Until next time, you guys have a great week and do everything really well. Get those A's, right? All right. See you next time. Bye-bye.